Welcome. I'm Jewish Arts Collaborative Executive Director Laura Mandel, and I'm honored that you've joined us today. This conversation that you're about to delve into is a deep dive into artivism, the intersection of art and activism that is the core tenet of the Be the Change public art project produced by the Jewish Arts Collaborative. Be the Change, the concept for a project rooted in the Jewish tenet of tzedakah, or tzedek, meaning justice in Hebrew, was actually born in 2020 when American Jewish World Service former director and social justice warrior Ruth Messinger said to Israeli-American artist Karen Tab, "To represent justice through art, I dream of seeing a larger-than-life tzedakah box like the Lucite Museum donation boxes that says, 'Be the Change,' in front of the Met Museum in New York." That was all I had to hear to know that this concept had the potential to invite us all into conversations about justice, and ultimately to help us all demystify the overwhelming task of making real change in the world, recognizing that this is a core tenet of Jewish life, and that artivism and repairing the world is an everyone issue, not just a Jewish issue. I'm grateful to my partner in crime, Karen Tab, who's the lifeblood behind this project, to Ruth Messinger for inspiring and supporting us at every step, to the Jewish Alliance for Law and Social Action for being thought partners in identifying and understanding legislation that underpins each of these works of art, and to the many, many partners who are central to bringing this project to life. Our first Be the Change show is on view in the Boston Fenway neighborhood for all of August and September 2022, and then it'll hit Cincinnati in the fall through our collaboration with the Ish Jewish Cultural Festival, along with Cincy Nice. And then it'll move over to the West Coast with our partners at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This program today is one of 3 that features 2 of our Boston-based artists. So today we are very lucky to be starting with Tran and Carolyn Lewenberg. Our hope is that this program will help us all understand how we can join them in being artivists. Now for the program at hand. While mental health and environmental justice at face value may be 2 very different and broad-reaching areas of injustice, we hope that this conversation today will help paint a holistic picture in which we understand that mental health and environmental justice, along with a lot of other areas of injustice that our Be the Change artists are exploring, are really inextricably linked. Ultimately, this is about the healing of the mind and the healing of the earth. So to delve into the detail and nuance of this, I feel really lucky to be with the brilliant team you see before you. So I'm going to introduce everyone before we launch in. First up, we have Boston-based artist Tran, whose piece Garden of Light is going to be exploring mental health, trauma, and especially healing. Second up, we have Boston-based artist Carolyn Lewenberg, whose piece Vital Organs explores environmental justice and the connection not just between people and the earth, but the trees and the entire ecosystem around us. Next up then, we will have Ruth Messinger, social justice warrior and former president of the American Jewish World Service, and as I mentioned, the inspiration behind Be the Change. Then we'll have expert Dr. Deborah Korn, internationally renowned trauma therapist and author of the new book, Every Memory Deserves Respect. Following her, we'll have Rabbi Jennie Rosenn, founder of Dayenu, a national organization dedicated to environmental justice and building a movement of American Jews confronting the climate crisis. And then we will have Rabbi Rachel Saphire of Temple Beth Elohim in Wellesley, Massachusetts, who we are very lucky to have in town with us as a national leader exploring issues of mental health. So welcome everyone, thank you for being with us. So to kick us off, we're gonna start with the art. So Tran and Carolyn are gonna start by sharing their work. Then we'll hear from Ruth Messinger, Dr. Deborah Korn, Rabbi Jennie Rosenn, and Rabbi Rachel Saphire to help frame and expand upon these issues. So Tran, we're going to start with your piece, The Garden of Light. And I love that this piece isn't just about the terrible trauma we've all experienced over the past 3 years and more, as we know, but that it's really about healing and moving forward. So will you tell us about The Garden of Light, where you came up with this beautiful name, the inspiration behind it, the policies that sparked it, and some of the communities that you're working with in this process?
Yeah, definitely. First off, thank you so much, Laura. Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be here with you all and to really engage in, I think, in such critical and valuable work, especially during these heavy and surreal times. When I was first kind of approached about this project, I was like, wow, like this is so, I think, needed in this moment. I think, the work of the arts, of just, culture, I think is especially, I think, critical when so much has unfolded for all of our communities in the world in past recent years and ongoing. I know that there's just so much things that often get so compounded that there's what are the layers that we begin to kind of address. And so I was thinking about, what are kind of issues that I think is so needed in this moment. And really what it really boils down to is really our mental health and state of healing, which is so much in flux. As I know, we're all kind of bearing so many heavy weights of grief, of loss, of trauma. And so I was thinking, how do I kind of encompass this and channel this in, through the arts in a way that really brings people together to really remember, to really as a form of empowerment. And so I was thinking about this idea of, of a healing site. And so oftentimes I myself, are drawn, and I know many of us are, really to nature and thinking about what are places that bring us solace of serenity. And so oftentimes we look to nature, and that is, I think the mother of all, site of beauty, of so much renewal. And so, just really thinking about all that, that has happened as we're still, unfolding in the, the pandemic is still real and going on. I think this need for healing and renewal is so urgent. And so thinking about how to really embed that into our every day, and thinking about, the power of public art when you're kind of walking down the street, what are things that, that makes you pause. And so thinking about really this way of engaging creative, really different ways of expressions that shared our experience, resiliency, and thinking about how do we keep on going. The author Min-Jin Lee said something so powerful recently. She said, our bodies are not designed to absorb and process this much violence, loss, and grief. And so thinking about what are the ways that we can help channel, and all of us are going through all this in one way or another. And so I was really inspired to think about this idea of a structure of a site. And so I was drawn to this really structure of a dome, kind of that almost like a womb-like structure that can really hold all of this, these feelings and, things that's going on with our body. And so I've been really thinking about ways to really structure that into this idea of a public art that can really, reflect the idea of a garden, of a dome. And so thinking about sites, and this, this happens kind of, throughout the day too. So not just only in daylight, but in thinking. And so this idea of really solar power and renewal. So that's something that I'm interested in really building into this structure, and really thinking about ways that in all of our, respective culture and traditions, in the Vietnamese culture, there's a saying, it's called Dia Buồn, which is, when we're going through something heavy, it's the idea of sharing our grief with one another. And in the Korean culture, it's the saying that if you share your pain is half, if you share your happiness is double. So thinking about the ways that so many traditions are really addressing and how to fold that into this idea of healing as a site in a way that empowers all of us, but also helps us to remember all that has happened, so that we can, hold that, so that we can continue to keep that with us as we move forward in all of our kind of bodies in the ways, so that we can help kind of create collective change together.
And Tran, that's so beautiful. And when you talk about collective change, I know one of the things that's really important to your process is working with community. Tell us a little bit about who you're working with through this process.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in this process of thinking about mental health and healing, there's so many, places. There's definitely, health provider institutions. For me, I'm really interested in our communities who are the healers, the light workers. And so I'm really interested in and really connecting with healers that are oftentimes not spotlighted, and oftentimes, in terms of resources, in terms of being able to access different communities in different languages, kind of cultural barriers. And so I'm really connecting with individual kind of healers. And so we're bringing in this kind of process of really bringing kind of healers together to really explore intergenerational trauma, kind of grief, what are the things that of our kind of lived experience, and how do we kind of put forth so that we can help kind of empower everyone to really seek in really addressing our own kind of the needs, and also as well as our collective communities.
That's beautiful. Thanking you for kicking us off so beautifully, Tran. So Carolyn, would you tell us about vital organs, your Be the Change piece? And I just have to say, the rib cage that we're seeing is just so striking and holds such critical meaning. So tell us about the inspiration for this, some of the policies you're speaking to with it, and how you're going about community engagement through your piece.
Sure. Thank you so much for including me in this amazing project, and in this conversation with everybody. Is so meaningful, where we can all sort of share our different thinking, and how our work sort of dovetails, and to sort of pick up where Tran left off, this idea of collective care, how we all sort of hold a little piece of the puzzle to do this healing work that needs to happen. I was really overwhelmed at first by the idea of picking something in this theme of Be the Change. Like, what is this change that I want to lift up, that I would love to see in the world. And because there's a lot going on. So I also, like Tran, kept coming back to the idea of the natural world as a place of renewal, as a source of healing. And so, what is the relationship between people and the earth? How can my work sort of cultivate that relationship and help people look towards the earth for inspiration, for healing, for the energy to keep going. And so I came upon the idea of creating this rib cage called Vital Organs, having the plants inside this rib cage, positioning them as the vital organs. The health of plants is vital to the health of us and to the earth. And so, I'm thinking about what kind of plants do I want to put inside this rib cage. I started thinking about, what are the plants that are so important for our health, locally and universally. And I arrived on the idea of planting a Three Sisters garden, which is an indigenous companion planting method where corn, beans, and squash grow together. The corn is the tall blonde sister. Actually, with the corn that I'm growing, she is red. I'm planting Riachimum, which is the King Philip corn, which is actually a native corn to this region that has been displaced for generations and has come back. So I feel extremely honored to grow her for the first time, to be in relationship with her, and to share her in this extremely public way. I'm involving a lot of different community members in this project behind the Eggleston branch library in Eggleston Square in Roxbury. We are growing Three Sisters garden mounds in community with folks who live around here in the Eastern Woodlands Rematriation Collective, who is offering support for us to learn from their wisdom in growing plants with indigenous wisdom and wisdom just thinking about balance. I think that so much of the work that needs to be done is about restoring balance, thinking about how much do we consume, how much do we give back. And so this piece is thinking a lot about how do we support each other, how do we take care of ourselves, and how do we take care of the planet, of the plants, and all of the ecosystems that give life. The legislation that is on the table, there's a few different things. One of them is there's no, it's called the Municipal Reforestry Act, which is a City of Boston ordinance that's on the table. Basically, it's saying that if you want to cut a tree down on private property, there has to be a process to go about doing that. Right now, you could just be like, I'm gonna cut down a bunch of trees on my land and put up another house here. And people can do that and are doing that. And our city's losing a ton of tree canopy. So there are the Municipal Reforestry Act is something that will provide a process so that you can't just do that. So that's a great thing that I hope people learn about and support, so that becomes part of our city way of caring for our trees. And also there's an act to improve outdoor and indoor air quality for communities burdened by transportation pollution. So this is sponsored by Representative Barber and Connolly and Senator Gillen. And so this is, it's improving indoor and outdoor air quality, especially for low income and minority environmental populations in those communities burdened by air emissions from highways, ports, airports, and congested roadways, and sets ambitious air quality targets. So those two seem like really helpful strategies in moving the needle forward. One of the things about my sculpture that I want to call attention to is that the base has a print of a mix of leaf litter and hands in different tones, different skin tones, different leaf tones. And the idea is that we're all interconnected and have to work together. As long as there are equity issues, these environmental issues cannot be addressed. That is a really important point in this piece. As long as there's hierarchy in leadership and in community structures, there will be there will be an unequal distribution of power and caring for the earth. It doesn't work that way. So the idea is to really look towards the natural world, to learn about how to work together, how to be truly interconnected and not be sort of this culture of like use and using, and try to move in a different direction of respecting differences and working collaboratively and sharing strengths and styles.
Thank you, Carolyn. I think that's such a beautiful encapsulation of the project, and the detail of your work, I think, adds so much color to this whole project for us. So I love that you talked about restoring balance and supporting one another through this work of making change in the world through this art, etc. And I think we are so lucky to have Ruth Messinger as not just the inspiration, but a key part of this project and team. Because Ruth, you are the expert here when it comes to why art is so important in activism and how are we using this art to help restore balance and support one another. So I'd love to hear from you for a little bit about basically why is art important in activism and why are we doing this whole project that's about artivism?
Well, first of all, I love the word artivism. I think we have now, thanks to J-Arts, have a new word in the vocabulary. And I also don't want to, I will talk about the impact of arts on activism, in a minute, but I don't want to claim credit for like having been immersed in this from the beginning. It is true that I've been immersed in activism from the beginning, starting about when I was 9. You don't need to know those stories, but it's come to me much more through my life about the value and potential of art in providing a vision for where we're headed. You just heard 2 amazing artists who have dedicated their art and their creativity to thinking about how the world could be a different place and finding ways to represent that. And you know, one of the things it says in the book of Proverbs is, where there is no vision, the people perish. And we're facing hard times with a lot of things that make people feel overwhelmed, feel challenged, uncertain about the value of their activism, sometimes not even sure that they know what they can do. And one of the things that I love about this whole project is we will be telling people what they can do on the environment and how to make change in a variety of areas. But the unique part of this project is that it will connect up that activism and those reminders as to how to be active, and the kind of pressure from people like me to say, you can't refuse to participate, which is also a Jewish teaching, but it will connect that to these visions, this notion of like, what might the world look like? Or sometimes even, what does it look like now? What are we doing in terms of not honoring the pursuit of justice? And so what I have found increasingly is that art and artists bring in a different perspective. They operate on a different level. It might be a meta level, but sometimes it's like a very nitty-gritty level, but they take their creative power and they use that to show pictures of change. As I said, sometimes it's sort of negative change. This is where we're headed, folks. This is what the world could look like, some of the bleakness that's represented by some artists. Or here's the connection in your mind between your rib cage and a live plant, and it's a way of getting people. And let me back up and say, activism only works if large numbers of people are involved and have enough faith to be the change that they want to see in the world. And artists bring to this effort their own stories, their own dramas, their own dance, their own music, and then most powerfully, as what we're showing in these series, their own art objects that allow people to think differently, to look at the issue in a way they might have not looked at it before. And I find that it's precisely that way of bringing that vision to people in a new way, in a different way, that helps people literally see better and allows them to embrace that vision and then use what they see and what they experience from and with the art and the artist to energize themselves in new ways and to strengthen their commitment to work for change. And that's what pursuing justice is all about. So I feel like once you see and hear the artists, which we've done a piece of right now in this presentation, and we'll do more of in these great outdoor art efforts in Fenway and then in Cincinnati and Los Angeles. Once people see it, their whole orientation toward the issue will be expanded in a way that I hope will bring them in and urge them to take new steps as activists and feel a part of a broader community that is working toward a very specific change.
Thank you, Ruth. That could not have been a more perfect intro to why artivism matters and to segue us into the next part of this conversation, where we're going to hear from Dr. Deborah Korn, Rabbi Jennie Rosenn, and Rabbi Rachel Saphire to illuminate some of the issues that we've started to think about here. Dr. Deborah Korn, Debbie, let's go to you now. I love that when you heard about both of Tran and Carolyn's pieces that you drew it back immediately to sort of this therapy 101 place. So Tell us a little bit about that and what these pieces make you think and how they inspire you.
So let me begin with what came to mind when I heard about and saw Carolyn's piece. As a trauma therapist, I spent a lot of time working with people who've been exposed to chronic, prolonged trauma. For example, many of my clients endured severe sexual, physical, or emotional abuse and neglect in their childhoods. And as children, many of them learned to dissociate from or disconnect from their emotions, their memories, and their physical bodies from the reality of what was happening in their lives. They did this in order to survive, in order to bear something that was basically unbearable. And then later as adults, they come into therapy seeking relief from their pain, but with a sense of self-alienation. They don't know how they feel or what they want or who they are. It feels too scary to look inside, to remember, to know the truth about their own life stories. So much of what I do, what my colleagues do, involves accompanying clients as they struggle to revisit and make sense of their past, to look and see and feel their feelings. We work together to build emotional muscles so they can tolerate knowing what they know. I help them to reconnect with their own personal truths and help them to do that without getting overwhelmed. And we do it together. We do it at just the right pace. And as they reconnect, they are able to process their traumatic memories and heal their pain. So many people in our world today remain disconnected. They remain disconnected from the climate crisis and from all of the issues related to our environment. So many issues that remain outside of awareness for many people. They don't understand how, for example, the climate crisis relates to them. They're unable perhaps to tolerate the knowing and the feelings that come with the truth. They respond with avoidance or denial. Like so many of my trauma survivors who don't yet know how to act on their own behalf, many people remain disconnected from the reality of the climate crisis, unaware of how they might take action on behalf of our environment and on behalf of humankind. And in my mind, our activism, our artivism has to help people to understand at the deepest level that this is our earth, that we are all interconnected, right? Humans, animals, plants, insects. We need to think carefully about how we can help people to approach a situation that feels overwhelming and perhaps leaves them feeling powerless and immobilized. We need to offer step-by-step guidance with regard to taking action, helping people to slowly transform intention into mobilization. And when I think about Tran's piece, I think about containment, holding, healing. I think about shelter. I also think about grounding through connection to the earth and the hope that comes with sunshine and with light. And again, as a trauma therapist, that's where I start with my clients. I work to create safety and comfort and containment for people. I strive to do that in communities, in families, in the therapy office, in the therapeutic relationship. And I work to help people regulate their nervous systems, to self-soothe, and to find ways to return to some kind of optimal zone where they're neither flooded with fear or distress, nor shut down or disconnected. And in this optimal zone, they can think and feel and experience, and they can begin the process of healing. They can grieve and make meaning out of all that's happened in their lives. And in this zone, they're resourced, right? They're able to access hope and their own resilience potential. And in our mental health advocacy and activism, we need to aim to increase the resources available to people in need so that they can find their footing, they can get grounded enough to begin the process of healing. When you don't feel seen, when you don't feel validated or safe or supported, your nervous system can't settle and you can't even begin to engage in a recovery program.
Debbie, you remind us all of not only how interconnected this all is, but what big challenges we're grappling. And that sometimes it's baby steps, step by step, and going back to the beginning. And I think that's really, really important. And with that in mind, Rabbi Rosenn, I want to turn it to you because I know we approached you originally about this project because of your background and experience with environmentalism. But I also know that something that's really been coming out for you is how holistic this whole project is and why that's so important. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I'm really excited that you're having this conversation because the intersection between the climate crisis and mental health and artivism is so profoundly integrated. The climate crisis, it's not just a political issue, though it certainly is a political issue. It's also really an issue of the soul. It's about honoring, as Debbie was talking about so beautifully, making space to feel the grief and the terror and the anxiety that comes with confronting the climate crisis, confronting racial injustice, confronting communal loss. And I think that art and music is such a source of visioning, as Ruth spoke about, grounding, inspiration. It can catalyze, and it can also sustain our spirits for the long road ahead, the work that we're doing. And so I think that our spiritual and mental health is part and parcel of what it means to confront the climate crisis. And we're seeing this as more and more articles and therapies and different kinds of communal responses and an acknowledgement of the emotional response, the spiritual response, and making space, as Debbie spoke about, not disconnecting. I think that, we know that most people, most Americans, are profoundly concerned about the climate crisis, but most aren't taking action on a systemic level at the scale that we need. And I think there are two reasons. I think one is people don't know what they can do to make a difference. And the second is exactly what we're speaking about, which is, how do we face the truth? The fact that without massive change, we're hurtling towards a world in which much of the earth will be uninhabitable. Our children and grandchildren won't have enough food to eat or clean air to breathe, as so beautifully the rib cage reflects, water to drink, that major cities will be underwater. It's like too much for us to take in. So as Debbie spoke about in terms of personal trauma, collectively, we disassociate. We turn away, we distract ourselves. It's like, how can our souls and psyche bear that? And so we distract ourselves with, the day-to-day work of our lives, with Netflix, with to-do lists. It's like, we just can't bear it. And I think that the power of art and community is to create some of those spaces where we can confront the existential, emotional, psychological issues the climate crisis raises, and grapple with them. What does it mean to live in this time, to parent in this time, to come of age in this time? How do we face the truth with all the grief and anxiety, for some people, guilt that it brings up? And how do we move towards courageous action? Because I think action is actually a really important part of how we live with this awful truth. And how do we do that in a way that is collective? Ruth said, it's so important to do this collectively and building on our collective power and raising a spiritual and religious and moral voice. And so we launched Dayenu 2 years ago, really to give American Jews pathways to take the kind of meaningful strategic action in partnership with other communities at the scale that science and justice demand, and to support folks really to face and move through the anxiety and angst that the climate crisis raises, and to move into courageous action, while accessing the sorts of things like art and music that sustain us and sustain us for the work ahead.
Thank you, Jennie. It's really beautiful framing for all of this. And I also just have to note, of course, we have Rabbi Rosenn and Rabbi Saphire with us because while, as I mentioned, at face value, you come at this from very different places. The truth is, I love how you both think about this work really holistically. So Rabbi Saphire, would you talk to us a little bit about where this conversation takes you?
Yes. Thank you so much for the invitation to be a part of this conversation and this important artivism. So when I saw Tran and Carolyn's art, I was quite humbled and moved spiritually. I am quite inspired from the book of Genesis, the beginning of the book of the Bible, of course, for us, Jews, the beginning of the Torah. When God creates the earth, the very beginning of our story, all of our story of humankind is the story of creation. And God so artfully, wondrously creates the earth. In fact, God speaks the earth into being. And we know that creation from this verse is an act of breath. We can't create without breathing, and the air we breathe connects all of us. And in that way, we are all connected. I also think of God as the original creator, and how when God created us, we learn that we are created in God's image, every single one of us, no matter where we come from. And if we are created in God's image and we are commanded to do God's will of goodness, this means that each one of us are creators, and dare I say, artists as well. And if God is so powerful to create and God creates change, then we, in God's image, shall be inspired and commanded to not only create, but to transform and create change as well. And it sounds as, we have mentioned, so overwhelming to be the change, but I am reminded from this verse and from God's inspiration that change starts with a single breath, just one breath at a time. And so I was so moved to see the visual image of Carolyn's artwork, these huge lungs, which of course are filled with the life force of plants, but also with breath. And I was thinking also of Tran's piece, which reminded me of that Garden of Eden, of that sanctuary, of the very first sanctuary that God created for us to dwell in, but also to move from and create change, because we didn't live in that Garden of Eden very long before we were expelled and sent forth to make a difference. So that's the place from where I begin with this artwork and our charge, not only just to be on this earth, but to take every breath as an inspiration to be creators, artists, and to make change.
That's really beautiful, Rachel. Thank you. So I'm curious, Tran and Carolyn, as the artists amongst us, what does this all raise for you?
I think it raises mainly just the work that needs to be done in community. Be the change, it could be, people could reflect on it as like, oh, what can I do? I feel like, a lot of pressure has been put on individuals to be the change, and it's impossible. Like it would actually do so much damage to people's, or it does do so much damage to people's mental health to feel overwhelmed of like, oh, like I can do more, I need to be doing more. And really like the individual efforts that people can make are great, but are not going to make the change. The change needs to be done collectively, and pressure needs to be put on corporations and the government to make decisions that are good for individuals. And so I think that this sort of like the interconnectedness piece that we started out with and keep coming back to is something that can happen in so many different ways. There's so many different forms of interconnectedness. And I think in my piece, what I really want people to think about is like, what would the plants want? Like, what would they be asking for? Because they can't advocate for themselves. We have to get to know them. We have to slow down and spend time with them over the arc of their life cycles. So, I'm curious, like during the time that the piece is up, it'll show up and the corn will be there and not ripe yet. It will ripen at Fenway, and maybe we'll harvest it there. And I hope that the life cycle of the plants will help people to really decide to get to know them a little bit more and build those relationships.
Well, and I love that you're all alluding to so much of this is about making people pay attention. And that's the power and beauty of art that some of you have said is it makes you stop. As Ruth said, it's a visual and it makes you notice these things. So Carolyn, that's really, really powerful. Thank you. Tran, how about you? What does this all raise for you?
A lot. I mean, I think everyone has shared such, I think dynamic things that are so insightful. And I think so many threads of, connection, so which Caroline alluded to. I think this harmony, and I think this, we are a reflection, of the earth, of like literally nature. Someone once told me it's like our bodies are literally like 70% water, 30% skin, and that's literally the reflection of the earth. And so this idea to both, work, internally, thinking about, Debbie mentioned about, systems of support for, ourselves, for one another, to really thinking about the interpersonal connections, to thinking about, the greater. And so all this is really about, I think, how are we holding true to ourselves, thinking about our own experience, really thinking through our own healing processes, because that's all a reflection of how do we, treat ourselves, one another, the world. And so this really thread of connection, I think, of healing and of really, really being intentional about how do we kind of, address ongoing things and to see how that plays out in an equitable in ways that, make sense, but that invites, I think, connections.
Thank you, Tran. That's beautiful. So I hope that for everyone watching, this has sort of begged the question, because you've all alluded to this, of what can we do? And you've all started to talk about ways we can actually make change in the world. And we know that this art is meant to be the inspiration, and it's not enough just to be inspired. We have to do. You've all mentioned this. So I'm curious, where does that take each of you when we think about what we can do? What are some action steps from where you sit? I see some of you nodding. Rachel, what are you thinking?
Thank you so much. So let me back up a moment and explain from where I come. So I am a synagogue rabbi serving a rather large community. It's spiritual needs, educational needs, pastoral needs. And I have to be honest that the issues of responding to mental wellness and environmental justice have only come about formally in our synagogue communally, as Carolyn mentioned, about a decade ago. And it does take time to ask the question and to awaken to see the vision, as Ruth mentioned. But once we have, what then do we do? And at synagogue, our motto is that each one of us, each of our voices are important. And if that we can hear our stories and how these issues impact us, and we listen, then we can act from that place of understanding. So the first thing we do at Temple as a community is listen to and hear one another's stories, especially on the issue of mental wellness. We called upon a few brave and courageous members in our community to break the silence and to tell their stories and to be honest about their experience, to express what it was or what it is that they need in the moment for healing. And we ask ourselves, how can the community respond? And not to be overwhelmed, we had to understand that we're not clinicians, we're not trained therapists or social workers, but what we can do is use our power as a community to connect folks to resources that already exist. And the other thing that we have spent a lot of time on is what we call stigma busting. So many of these issues, as we have said, we can put them out of our mind and pretend that they don't happen or that they don't matter, or we might actually reduce them. And I actually want to share the question in our community that raised the issue of mental wellness to the forefront for us. A congregant called and said, "Why does no one deliver a brisket when one returns home from a mental health hospital? Someone comes home from surgery, we deliver a meal. Someone is diagnosed with cancer, we deliver a meal. But when someone is admitted into a day program or comes home from a healing program, we don't respond as a community." And this for us lifted up the issue at hand, that we actually don't recognize mental wellness on the same level that we do as physical wellness. And this takes me to the final point that I want to make right now, which is that each one of us are striving for wellness. We are hoping to be healthy and well. And in Judaism, this value that we strive for is called shalom, is called wholeness. We often translate that word shalom as peace, but literally the word means wholeness. So for us to feel whole and well, we need to be healthy in body, and we need to be healthy in mind, and we also need to be healthy in spirit. So our institution started to begin to think about how we could bring wellness to all of those areas.
Thank you, Rachel. That's really, really beautiful. And while you are not a trained clinician, this is why we are very fortunate to have Debbie with us. And I'm curious, Debbie, where does that take you?
I was thinking about how Tran and Carolyn are using their artistic gifts to inspire change in the world. And they're starting with their strengths, and they're collaborating with others who have different skill sets, right, to advocate for social and environmental justice and healing. I think we should each ask ourselves, what is my superpower? What am I really good at? What am I most passionate about? What is my heart drawn to? For me, it's doing psychotherapy and teaching and educating the public about trauma-informed treatment. It's working to fight hunger. So I would say pick something, one cause, one project, one organization, play to your strengths, and connect with others who will complement your talents, who will keep you going, who will keep you accountable. Move out of isolation and into connection. We've talked so much today about that, the importance of interaction and community and connectivity. And it's just so clear to me that we can't face any of these issues, whether they're mental health issues or the issues that have to do with our world and our environment. We cannot face them alone. We need to join with other people who can complement what we bring to the party. So just to highlight that in both of these domains that we're talking about today, both environmental activism and with regard to mental health, just highlighting the importance of coming out of the aloneness and doing it with others.
Yeah, and it's certainly an issue or I shouldn't even say post-COVID, but coming out of COVID, but it's an eternal issue. So Jennie, please go ahead. Where does this take you?
To pick up on what Debbie said so beautifully, I think that it's a question of what do we have to offer, as Debbie said. I think about the Mishkan, how everybody brings their offerings to the building of the Mishkan, the sanctuary where God dwells, and we each have something to offer. And to think of ourselves, the activist and writer Bill McKibben says, the most important thing an individual can do is be less of an individual and join movements that are sharp enough to make real change. And I think we're in a moment now where we need to be thinking big, envisioning big. The kind of change that we need is on a systemic level, and we need to be rooted, as people have spoken so beautifully about, in our own experience and connected to all of the emotions that the climate crisis and other crises raise. And in that context of community, come together, not to do this alone, with our offerings, with what it is that is, as Debbie said, our superpower. And so the one action that I would really encourage us all to take is to join a movement. Might be Dayenu, there are many, many other movements for change where you can really come together with our collective power, because we have a lot of collective power and we need to also tap into that for the kind of change that we need if we're to build a world in which all people can thrive and a world that is sustainable and livable and just for all people for generations to come.
Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I would say join a movement, but don't join alone. We are all part of other communities. I'm part of a synagogue community, a small, school community. And so if you can organize within the institutions or communities or neighborhoods, schools in which you are a part and bring them together for the movement, to the movement, will create greater change.
Absolutely.
And I would also love to add, in that spirit, to reach outside of your cultural group, if possible, to work in movement spaces.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. All right, so I want to shift a little bit because I know we have all been so inspired by this work, and I am not asking any of you to be artists or creators in this moment, but I'm curious. This whole project was inspired, as we said, when artist Karen Tabb asked Ruth Messinger what she would dream as the ultimate vision of art representing tzedakah, tzedek, justice. And Ruth, of course, said this lucite box, like one of the donation boxes at a museum in front of the Met. So I'm curious from any of you, if you had a dream of how we could go about making the change that is in addition to what we're already seeing, what might that look like?
Well, I love this question. I am a wannabe artist, so it's just wonderful to be given creative license to think about this. My dream tzedakah box would be a great big fountain like the ones that you see in beautiful parks where people throw pennies in for good luck. And there would be statues of people, arm in arm, hand in hand, all ages, colors, genders, orientations. These statues of people would form the rim of the fountain's basin. And the basin would be filled with water and fish representing the animal world. And there would be concentric circles of lights and plants toward the center of the basin. The fountains would shoot up from the center, reaching for the sky, bursting forth with energy and with hope. And people would cherish the opportunity to contribute money every time they'd visit this fountain, this work of art.
That's beautiful. Rachel, go ahead.
I love the idea of a public tzedakah box, but Ruth's idea of using a Jewish ritual item as a public display of art got me thinking about another ritual item, which is the prayer shawl or the talit, which to me holds so much meaning and spiritual significance. We wrap it around our bodies and our shoulders. And the whole understanding of the talit is that when we wear it, we are to feel commanded and compelled. And so first of all, I think this idea of artivism should make us feel compelled. So I'm picturing, haven't thought through this much, but a life-size talit that has four corners with the tassels and threads. And of course, the four corners symbolize the four corners of the earth, that we're all involved. These issues touch all corners. All of us can be inspired. And then the final thing I'm picturing is that this idea of the thread that is woven, like how far could that thread travel really to reach all four corners of the earth? And maybe from that art, there's something, that a thread that you could take away to travel back with you to inspire you to remain connected. Thank you for that license to dream and vision as well.
This is fun, and you better watch out, because when you are in the presence of artists, you never know what will come of this. Jennie, do you have any thoughts?
No, I'm taking in both of those images. So powerful, so powerful. I'm thinking it has me thinking also about how do we reflect communally what we have in our homes. You know, so many of us have tzedakah boxes at home, and how does our practice, kind of our personal practice and our public practice, reflect each other? And so as I'm listening to Rachel and Debbie, just thinking about what would that look like to be reflected in both public and private spaces.
That's really interesting. And something I love about public art, the ability to show these concepts out in the open space. So I'm curious, Carolyn and Tran, thinking about this conversation, if you had one more thing that you wished people would walk away from your piece thinking or doing, what would it be?
There's a lot. I'm trying to just pinpoint, just because like everyone has been saying just really, I think, thoughtful things. But one thing that I've just been thinking when you all were sharing is that, I don't know, and this is not to contradict, but I feel like in our current world, where there's so much that's asked of us, and there's so much, I think, this kind of multitasking, this constant, even like the word marketing and all the noises, it's like, yes, be more present, be more connected, but it's also like, I would also say, like, do less robotic and busy work too. This idea of doing more, but what are we also subtracting to? Because I think amidst this conversation of mental health and, being able to be in harmony, I just feel like there's constantly so much. And while this is all, I think, to be active, to be, agents of change, is also like, what are we also willing to give up to, so that we're more in balance and to be sustainable. And so in a way, I would want, I think, viewers and people from, at least my piece or all of our work is just like, what is this, the world and the life that we want to build? And what is our vision for that? I'm really inspired by what Ruth said earlier about, the quote, where there is no vision, the people perish. And I'm thinking a lot about, the role, what is our role for ourselves, the role of artists, of creative. And I really believe that all of us, are artists, and whether or not we choose to use our creativity. So what is all of that collectively? And so, yeah, just thinking a lot about, I think, when so much is constantly asked of us, what do we also need to give up to?
Absolutely. Carolyn, what about you?
Yeah, I think that so much of what Deborah said in her answer earlier, about, thinking about your strengths and working collectively, really resonated. Also thinking about, the checks and balances that we can sort of like have within ourselves to check ourselves. I think there's so much relearning and retraining in our behaviors, to be able to live in balance with the earth, like just basic stuff, like what we buy, how we use materials, and how we interact with people. I think that there's all these systems of hierarchy that we are part of that are seriously damaging to people and to the earth that we don't even recognize. And so there's just so much deep, like, unlearning and unpacking that is sort of starting to become a practice in my life. And I'm trying not to like attach judgment to it, but there's just a lot of work. And I think sort of like accepting the work as just part of our lives. It's not good or bad, or it just is. And so I guess I would hope people see themselves in relationship with the natural world and with other people in this sort of like thinking about how is there balance between myself and other people? How is there balance between myself and plants? So just kind of having this sort of internal dialogue and reflection ongoing in the background, and rethinking this sort of like hierarchical system. So, listening more. I guess it depends on everybody, like what are the different things that each person needs to work on to be more in balance. And I did want to unpack a little a thing that I had mentioned earlier about reaching across cultural groups and movement spaces, and really thinking about how you show this sort of humility in working with plants, the same kind of humility as working in different cultural groups or in your own, just making that space to really pay attention. How do people relate to each other? How do people grow together? How do plants grow together? Sort of having more humility in all of the relationships that we have.
I think that's such a beautiful thought as we go towards the end of this program, because we've talked about humility on all levels. We've talked about interconnectedness. It is clear that, we keep saying there are 6 different pieces in this Be the Change project in Boston. And then there's actually going to be 6 different pieces in each of the 3 cities. And we've been talking about how overwhelming that is in terms of the amount of injustice we're tackling. And I really appreciate how each of you have gone in to think really critically about what we can actually do and how we can actually make change through this, inspired by this. So one of the things that has been really important to this process for us as a team, I think, has been really thinking about not just the conversations, but what we do with them to move forward, how we reflect, how we make space to actually consider these conversations and make action steps. So one of the things that we are going to do is have a few minutes now for reflection. We have a partner in an organization called Tzedek Box, which is led by Rabbi Andrew Mandel. And Tzedek Box is a new ritual supporting Jews and their allies in the ancient pursuit of a more just society. So of course, we are kindred spirits here. And as they say at Tzedek Box, every time you strive to build a better world, add a note to your box. Once a year, you open that box. And then, as Rabbi Andrew Mandel says, we often have important and weighty conversations about justice without ample space to reflect. So this is our moment to do that. So for the next few minutes, we are actually going to listen to a really beautiful song by Rabbi Menachem Creditor called Olam Chesed Yebaneh, a just world we will build. And for the next few minutes, while we're listening, we're all going to go ahead and take the time to process some of what we've just talked about. Go ahead, open your Tzedek box, and you can go ahead and put whatever into that box feels compelling to you coming out of this conversation. And after these 5 minutes of reflection, we are going to have some blessings to close us out from Rabbi Rosenn and Rabbi Saphire, so that we can sort of complete this conversation.
And you must build this world from love. And if we build this world from love, Tananai, nai, nai, ananai, na. Olam chesed yibane. Tananai, nai, nai, ananai, na. Olam chesed yibane. Tananai, nai, nai, ananai, na.
All right, so with this time to reflect, Rabbi Rosenn, I'd like to invite you to offer a closing blessing for us.
Thank you, and thank you for this very rich conversation. Harachaman, God full of compassion, grant us the strength and space to confront the feelings of despair and grief, loss and anxiety, the multitude of human emotions that emerge for each of us as we face the truth of the climate crisis and what's at stake, our collective future, the future for our children, for our grandchildren, for our nations and the world's most vulnerable populations. Help us not to look away, but to support one another in community as we face this painful truth. Help us to come together with each other in art and in song, in tradition and ritual, resilient and grounded in spirit, so that we may rise up together and envision and build a different future, a world in which all may thrive, a world that is livable, sustainable, and just for all people for generations to come. Harachaman, God full of compassion and mercy, give us the strength to come together in this hard and holy work.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. And Rachel, Rabbi Saphire, would you like to offer some words?
Yes, thank you. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, our God, God of our mothers and fathers, creator of this universe, source of all life, healer of body, soul, spirit, and earth. Guide us in our search for wholeness and serenity. Help us to see the value in every human being as we see the beauty and wonder in your world every day. Give us the energy to mend and heal and the courage to advocate for justice. May we be your partner in creation. May we be the change for goodness. Blessed are you, God, who spreads a shelter of peace over us and over all the earth. And let us say,
Amen.
Amen. Thank you all so much. This has really been inspiring and moving. And what I want to remind everyone out there is that our hope is that we want to make it easier for you to be an activist, an artivist, to make change in the world like we've talked about. So not only have you all given us some great marching orders, but I hope you will all go to the jartsboston.org website to check out the whole Be the Change project. Our hope is to give you links and tools based on everything we've talked about so that you can go out and make change in the world through this project and be inspired to go forth and do. So thank you all so much for unpacking this with us today, for inspiring us all, for giving us such words of wisdom and beauty. It's really been incredible to hear this holistic conversation and how each of your points come together to tell a full story. So I am most appreciative. I want to say thank you on behalf of the Jewish Arts Collaborative, on behalf of the Be the Change team. Thank you all so much. I hope all of us will get out to see the art in Boston, in Cincinnati, and in LA if possible. And there's so much more to come. So thank you all so much for being here with us today.